morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
We want to get started this morning by talking to Ambassador David Comissiong, Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM. And he has indeed been busy over the last couple of weeks. We've missed him for the last 2 weeks, but he's in Barbados. So we're lucky to have him with us this morning. Good morning to you, Ambassador. Welcome.
Morning, Tisha. It's great to be back.
All right. So you missed quite a few things. Usually you're bringing us up to scratch. I hope I don't have to bring you up to scratch this morning. And I know that's most certainly not true because you really have been at the forefront of all that happened in the time that you were not on island. I know that you probably were still, participating from behind the scenes.
No, but when you're traveling, you do sometimes miss some important happenings in Barbados. But yes, this has been a very busy time for me, traveling. When last I was on, 2 weeks ago, that Tuesday I was leaving for Suriname to attend the ministerial meeting of the Association of Caribbean States. I know we always talk about CARICOM, and Barbadians know that I am the ambassador to CARICOM, but I'm also Barbados' ambassador to the Association of Caribbean States, which is this wider organization of the Greater Caribbean. It was the brainchild of CARICOM. It actually, in a sense, came out of CARICOM, but it is CARICOM plus. It is CARICOM plus the countries of Central America, the countries of Northern South America, Venezuela, Colombia, also Mexico, Cuba, Dominican Republic. And yes, so every year it has its Ministerial Council meeting, which is like the business meeting, where it looks at from budget to the different special committees to the directorates, etc., etc. So that was in Suriname this year. And then the week after, last week, I was off to Guyana for CARICOM's, the meeting of the Council for Trade and Economic Development. And then tomorrow I'm off to Dominica for the meeting of CARICOM foreign ministers. So yes, it'd be good for me to give our people just a little insight into what happened at those various meetings.
All right. Well, let's start at the Association of Caribbean States, or ACS, Ministerial Council meeting that happened in Suriname. And first of all, I think it's important to kind of lay out for us the difference when we're talking about the Association of Caribbean States. Is that very different from the membership of what we know of CARICOM, and in terms of the countries that are part of it?
Yeah, well, just think of it as CARICOM plus. I have a map. I'm not sure if you got the map, but the map kind of lays out. It's 25 member states. CARICOM is 15. The Association of Caribbean States is 25. And they're all grouped into different groups. So we have the CARICOM group, we have the Central American group, and then we have the group of three, the big three: Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia. And then we have what they call the non-group group, which is a group of Panama, Cuba, and Dominican Republic. And so these groups, they share the leadership of the ACS. So for example, over the last year, Suriname was chair of the Ministerial Council. That's why we met in Suriname. But Suriname's chairmanship has ended, and so at the meeting, we established Colombia as the new chair. So Colombia is part of the group of three. So it is the turn of the group of three to chair the ACS. So Colombia is the new chair, and then the ACS. To explain the ACS, it is more about collaboration and cooperation. So it is not as deep an integration as CARICOM. CARICOM is deeper. CARICOM is about a single market and single economy and functional cooperation manifested in CARICOM institutions. It's about foreign policy coordination. The ACS is not about any of, the ACS doesn't go that deep And if I tell you the names of the special committees of the ACS, you'll get a sense of what really it does. So, for example, in addition to the Ministerial Council, you have the Special Committee on Sustainable Tourism. So these are the priority areas of the ACS, sustainable tourism. And incidentally, Barbados was the chair last year, and now we are the vice chair. And we were represented by Ms. Marsha Allen of the BTMI. We are now the vice chair. Then there's a special committee on disaster risk reduction. So that gives you an idea. The ACS is concerned with hurricanes and disasters in the region. Mexico is the chair of that special committee. Then there's a special committee on transport, and this will please you, Tisha. I know you're always onto the issue of transport within the region. Guatemala is the chair of that special committee. And incidentally, these special committees are made up of member states. So it's chaired by a particular member states, and you have two vice chairs from different member states and a rapporteur. Then there's a special committee on trade development and external economic relations. Martinique chairs that. Special committee on budget and administration. Well, that's about the internal budgetary and administrative affairs. And special committee on cooperation and resource mobilization. In addition, there's the Caribbean Sea Commission, because it is really the Caribbean Sea that brings us all together. The countries of the ACS are countries that surround this 1 million square mile Caribbean Sea that we all claim. And then one of the newest entities is the Sargassum Commission. This is something that was set up quite recently as a response to the Sargassum challenge that virtually all of the countries face. So that's the structure, and that structure tells you that the ACS is really about collaboration in relation to transport, disaster risk reduction, sustainable tourism, trade. That's basically how it functions. One of the things that we didn't accomplish at the council meeting, which we really should have, is that we are supposed to transition to a new Secretary General. So the current Secretary General is a gentleman from Panama. So he's part of the non-group group, Panama, Cuba, Dominican Republic. But it is now the turn of the Central American group to provide the Secretary General of the organization. But for some reason, they have not been able yet to come up with a candidate. So the current Secretary General, his term is being extended by 3 months to give this group an extended opportunity to arrive at a candidate for Secretary General. So that's basically it. Very important is that we are now celebrating the 30th anniversary of the ACS. And Barbados went to the meeting with a proposal that we do, as part of that celebration, we do a research project, a publication on the history of the Caribbean Sea. Because we said, look, what binds us all together is this Caribbean Sea. Everybody knows about the Mediterranean Sea, the Arabian Sea, the Adriatic Sea. Why don't we do something to lift up our Caribbean Sea to the same status of these other famous seas? And so that idea was readily accepted, and we are saying not just a book, but also a documentary, also some things for children, whether it be cartoons, comic books, etc. So hopefully that will be accomplished, and we will have something that really brings the ACS alive to our people, because a lot of our people really don't know much about the ACS. So we said, look, let's tell the history of our Caribbean Sea. I mean, from the distant past with the Amerindian people who were up and down this Caribbean Sea, to the European colonization, the pirates, the colonization, all the rest of it, and then all of the wonders of the Caribbean Sea.
Well, that excites me for more reasons than one. I most certainly look forward to that. A series on the Caribbean Sea would absolutely be intriguing, and I think it's timely as well. I want to lay out a little bit the shape that these meetings take in terms of how you're able to get through seemingly so much in 2, sometimes just 3 days. You know, is it that Barbados sits in on sessions or plenary sessions, or maybe meetings on a select few things, and other countries that see things that might be a little more relevant in their neck of the woods, so to speak, sit in on other sessions? Or is it does it take the form of a larger meeting with everybody kind of weighing in?
No, it's the large meeting with everybody weighing in, but the trick to it is that you always have an officials preparatory meeting a week or 2 before the ministerial meeting. So a lot of the work is already done. By the time by the time the ministers came to Suriname, for example, officials had already sat down and gone through the entire agenda and really worked out most of the things. So typically, the ministers come with most of the issues already sorted out, and it is only if there's some remaining thorny issues or issues that people at an officials level really could not deal with. So then they would fill in those blanks, so to speak. And similarly with the, so for example, the Council for CARICOM's Council for Trade and Economic Development, the meeting in Guyana last week, there would have been an officials meeting 2 weeks before. So the officials, because if you look at the agenda, you're quite right, Tisha. I mean, this is the agenda for the COTED meeting, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, right? I mean, a multiplicity of items. But so the only reason the ministers are able to get through this agenda in 2 days is really because a lot of the work has already been done by the officials, you know, and that's how these organizations tend to work. But we had, you know, again, we call this the COTED, the Council for Trade and Economic Development, and it brings together the ministers with responsibility for trade. So, for example, leading the Barbados delegation at this meeting was Honorable Sandra Husbands, who was filling in for Honorable Kerry Simmons. And why Minister Husbands? Well, before she went over to the Ministry of Education, she was our Minister of Foreign Trade. So, you know, we are dealing with things like the implementation of the single market and single economy. We are looking at the issue of the free movement of CARICOM nationals, which, you remember, we said that we had set ourselves the target date of the end of March, and now it has been postponed. But it's been postponed because some of the countries have been nitpicking over little things like what is the definition of primary health care, what is the definition of secondary education. Should CARICOM nationals, do they have to arrive at the airport with a passport or with some other form of identification due? So these are little things that some member states have, you know, kind of been nitpicking at, and so it's now been put into the hands of the heads of government, and they're going to be meeting early next month, hopefully to resolve these little issues and be able to deliver the full freedom of movement at the Heads of Government Conference in July. Then there were things like the CARICOM Competition Commission, which is like our Fair Trading Commission, but on a regional scale. What is happening with that? The number of, under the revised treaty, every CARICOM country should really have a competition commission, something like a Fair Trading Commission. Several of the member states don't. And Barbados has proposed, okay, well, why not give the regional CARICOM Competition Commission the power to be both a regional body but also a national body, especially for those member states that don't have national competition commissions. And so we set up a working group at this meeting. We agreed on a working group to look at that idea, which is an idea of Barbados. Then there's Article 164 of the revised treaty, which is an article that says because there are going to be winners and losers in the single market and single economy, there must be this special regime for the lesser developed countries where they get tariff protection for a period of time against the bigger countries, like the more developed ones like Barbados and Jamaica and Trinidad, etc. And they are not satisfied with how this has been implemented, and so there was a lot of discussion about that. And then, of course, the part of the business of the COTED is to look at, we have the common external tariff that applies a tariff to foreign goods coming into our region, because we want to privilege our own domestic producers, but countries come to the COTED to say, look, we don't have enough domestic production capacity on this good or that good, so we are asking that the tariff be suspended so that we get the right to bring in these foreign goods duty-free or at a lesser duty. So we always go through this thing. So for example, both Trinidad and Antigua were asking for suspension for some types of cement. And so Barbados was able to say, but Iraq Cement Company is now not only producing for the Barbados market, but it is now also exporting, because there was a period of time when it was just producing for Barbados. So we were able to inform them it is now exporting to the region, so you don't need a suspension for this or that, So things like this, and then there's some countries that breach the rules, and the COTED looks at these breaches. For example, Trinidad and Tobago, for a long time now, has been keeping out Grenada's honey. Some strange reason that they've not been allowing Grenada honey into Trinidad and Tobago. So we addressed that, and they assured us that it's something to do with new legislation, and they're about to pass this legislation. So stuff like that, the stuff of trade, of customs and tariffs, and goods and so forth. So that's basically what COTED is all about. Of course, we also look at our external economic and trade relations. So we get a report on the latest Ministerial Conference at the World Trade Organization. We looked at our upcoming discussions with Colombia about a free trade agreement and so forth. Then there are things like standards, CROSSQ. So CROSSQ comes to the meeting, and CROSSQ is presenting some regional standard that they want the COTED to approve. The big thing that CROSSQ is working on now is front of label packaging. For food stuff and so forth. So things like that. That's the basic business of the Council for Trade and Economic Development.
And of course, these are organizations, many of them based here in Barbados, but others based in other parts of the Caribbean, that really help to oil this machinery and keep it going in terms of the relationships we have and how we keep each other accountable, and all in keeping with what's coming up in Barbados starting today, which is the Barbados UNCTAD Global Supply Chain Forum. I understand even the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization and other such international organizations will be represented here in Barbados at this forum that starts today.
That's a big one, Tisha.
Absolutely.
Barbados and the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development partnering to hold this very first high-level global supply chain forum. And Barbados has been chairing UNCTAD now for the past 3 years. We have held the presidency of UNCTAD, and when we held the 15th UNCTAD in Barbados 3 years ago, it was Prime Minister Motley who said, look, we are very concerned about these global supply chains. We had the problem during COVID, where small island developing countries like ours could easily be shut out of the global supplies. And even outside of periods of crisis, she's been making the point, we want to transition to renewable energy, but we can't get access on the international market to the batteries that we need, to a lot of the materials that we need to actually photovoltaic systems and so forth. So UNCTAD listened to Barbados, and they've worked with us now to have this major forum here where we are going to be looking at this problem. We're going to be looking at the problem of the freight rates that have gone up, the cost of transportation for goods, and they're also going to be looking forward towards other challenges that might come on the horizon, that might present problems, especially for small island developing countries that have open economies, that depend so much on international trade, you know. So it's a very important meeting. It starts today. It's a 4-day conference, ends on Friday. And then from that conference and what is determined at this Global Supply Chain Forum, those results will be taken into the International Small Island Developing States Conference that is being held in Antigua at the beginning of next week.
That's right,
Yeah.
SIDS 4. Before we move off to SIDS 4, though, I want to spend a little time on the conference and how, I mean, it's always a good time to talk about supply chain, but when we look at what's happened not only here in Barbados, but across the world in the last couple of years by way of the global supply chain, we see how we can be affected in a massive way. And I think what's been going on has sparked deeper discussion on why we need to be far more self-sufficient, particularly where food is concerned. And so it's interesting to look at how that ties into the 25 by 25 initiative that's being shared. But I want to talk specifically about what's happening with the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, and the Red Sea. Very different happenings with the 3 passages where we have a lot of trade happening with shipping and so on. But with troubles with all of them, obviously the Red Sea, given what's happening in the Middle East now with the warring factions, water level problems with the Panama Canal, and then there being trouble with blockage and so on with the Suez Canal. Those things are things that we might feel in this part of the world won't affect us, but we have indeed been seeing some of the spin-off effects. So what, to your mind, are some of the major things that Barbados will be tabling at this UNCTAD UN Global Supply Chain Forum as the country kind of with lead responsibility at this time?
Well, I'm not sure what the specific items Barbados might be tabling, but I know that Barbados's mission at this event really is to represent small island developing states. And okay, because coming to this conference are leaders of the relevant international organizations, the WTO, you said maritime,
the IMO, yes,
transport, all of that, plus the private sector players, the people involved in transport and trade and so forth. And I think what Barbados wants to do is to get them to think about the plight, the situation of small island developing states, because we tend to get lost. We can be easily overlooked because we are such a small part of the market. And Barbados wants them to think about looking at challenges that currently affect us, like the inordinately high freight rates, the inordinately high transportation costs, maritime transportation, but also to look forward, to anticipate challenges that might come, and to start not just thinking about it, but start making policy decisions that would prepare us to deal with the situation of small island developing states. But you're quite right. I mean, the world is a very interconnected place. So you have a war in Ukraine, and immediately that sets off a whole chain reaction that sends the prices of certain food items skyrocketing. So Barbados is saying, let us pay some special attention to the vulnerability of small island developing states, and let us begin to think about how we can be more protective of small island developing states. So I think that's where we are going. But yes, we have learned the lesson that even while we do that, the most sensible thing for us to do really is to be as self-reliant as possible. And we have learned, that's why we, as you said, the food production initiative, the 25 by 25, but also the initiative that's been pushed by Prime Minister Motley, that we must produce vaccines and medications in our own region, so that if push comes to shove, we are not so vulnerable and exposed. And hence, the collaboration with Rwanda and with hopefully with Cuba as well. We are going to be setting up these life sciences parks here in Barbados, and a critical component of the life science park will be the manufacture of vaccines and other medications. So that is the kind of thinking that we really need to deal with this very unstable, and sometimes heartless world. Mm-hmm.
How are we faring in terms of, I mean, there's so much happening. In the coming weeks, Barbados really is going to be a little more than a hive of activity. I think that'll be an understatement, with looking toward cricket and all that's happening across the island to prepare for that. One of the countries we're hosting, Oman, they're already here. There was a match at UE yesterday with a Barbados Select 11, and I got a chance to peek at that. We have this UNCTAD conference coming up. We're getting ready for the 4th installment of the SIDS conference in Antigua, as you mentioned. Talk about how Barbados is faring generally in terms of what we're doing at all of these conferences to ensure that we are ahead of or in step with where we need to be to accomplish some of these sustainable development goals that we've been talking about for so long. Initially, 2030 seemed like a lifetime away, but here we are, literally just a few years out.
Yeah, you're so correct, Tisha. You know, Barbados is in the vanguard of so many things. You know, whether it's the Bridgetown Initiative, the whole climate change agenda, Global Supply Forum, the very first time that UNCTAD or any other institution is holding a high-level forum looking at global supply chains and the vulnerability of small countries. So yes, we are out there. Our Prime Minister, probably the most respected international statesperson today in the world, and really in the vanguard. My concern is that our people, that we are communicating with our people are knowledgeable about all that their country is involved in, and that they feel a part of it, and that they're participating in it. And this is where the news, the media houses, the work that you do is so important. This is why I make the effort to wake up early every Tuesday morning to come to do these programs, because I know that this is so critical. It's so critical that our people feel a sense of involvement and participation. So I would like to hope that, you know, that as we do these powerful events, the Global Supply Chain Forum starting today at Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center, and the eyes of the world will be on Barbados over the next 4 days. Yes, and then the Cricket World Cup and so forth. But that we really do reach our people, and that they feel an integral part of it all, because that's what development is all about. It's about people being connected and participating and feeling a part of it. And that is what worries me. It worries me that sometimes, and a lot depends on the media and the media host, because if the media host is focusing on some little titillating triviality to the neglect of much more substantial things, and is not directing the attention of the citizenry to those much more substantial things, it means that we are really doing ourselves a disservice. And I fear that too much of that really happens, the little trivialities that make the front pages, etc., to the neglect of really substantial things. I would like, for example, the young people of Barbados to really appropriate this issue of environmentalism, climate change, Bridgetown Initiative, because this is so critical to the world that is going to be left to them. And in fact, I can't even say left to them, because it's not a futuristic issue. The issue is with us right now. So I would love our young people to become the national population that has really taken an interest in this issue, and is really on the cutting edge of it. But that will depend on how well it is communicated to them, that we are able to prick their imagination and to get them really eager about it.
That's why it's important, Ambassador. I can agree with what you're saying about the media needing to take, a proactive approach in terms of how we report in our quest to be responsible and to share all that's happening. But for a long time, I felt as though there was a them and us kind of syndrome going on, particularly with a lot of these closed door sessions where the mainstream media weren't necessarily welcome. So I feel that has changed in a great deal in the last few years. So it truly has made a big difference. I remember being a very young journalist and being able to go off to the Commonwealth Youth Ministers meeting to be able to witness all that was happening then and share with what was happening back home. These aren't things that we necessarily saw for a long time, I'd say over maybe a 15-year period here in Barbados, but a change I think has come again, where we are kind of reporting on what missions across the globe are doing, and bringing more of these meetings here, sharing in a way that the average Barbadian can understand the importance of why we need to have an UNCTAD conference here, and what it means for Barbadians to be able to attract these high-level discussions and fora. So I feel like it has changed.
You're moving in the right direction.
I feel like we're moving in the right direction in terms of being more welcoming for the media.
Yeah, well, I mean, truth be told, I mean, this is part of the hallmark of Prime Minister Motley's leadership. I mean, she's very attuned to the need for communication, so much so that when she travels with her own communications specialist, Mr. Charles Jong, who captures a lot on the video and share, and she is attuned to the whole social media platforms and so forth. So yes, you're quite right that she has opened up, she has moved more in that direction than perhaps previous administrations. But of course, there is still that institutional culture, especially a civil service culture, where we don't speak publicly and so forth. I have found that, yes, as a person coming, I'm not a traditional civil servant, I've come from outside, but I have found that there's that civil service culture that you don't engage with the media, you don't speak publicly and so forth, and we really need to break that down, because development is about the involvement of the people. You can't have development if the people are not involved. You may be doing some good things, but is it really deep-rooted development if the people are not involved? No. And the people cannot be involved if you are not communicating and sharing information, and then setting up mechanisms for two-way street too, where there can be, feedback and so forth. So we just, I'm agreeing with you. I think our Prime Minister has brought that new, she's actually led the way with that new impulse, but it needs to go further, it needs to go deeper, and she can't do it all. So, she needs to be backed up in multiple ways.
All right, you're heading off to COFCOR in Dominica, are you, in the coming days?
Tomorrow.
All right.
Tomorrow. So unfortunately, last week, was it last week? I missed quite a bit, or week before, I missed quite a bit of the Liberian visit. And similarly, I'm going to miss quite a bit of the Global Supply Chain Forum because duty calls on me to go to Dominica for this meeting. And again, we're going to be looking at basically CARICOM's bilateral relations. We're going to be examining our relations with Brazil, Canada, Cuba, India, Japan, Korea, Mexico, US, and Africa. And I guess we're going to be reflecting on this pleasing development that occurred where 4 CARICOM member states recognized the state of Palestine, sending a very powerful message, I think, internationally. Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, the Bahamas, and Jamaica. And I would imagine we are also going to be reflecting on what recently happened with relation to Cuba, where the United States removed Cuba from the list of countries that were not fully cooperating with the fight against terrorism. So they have conceded, yes, Cuba is fully cooperating with the fight against terrorism, but the US State Department still has Cuba on the list of countries that sponsor terrorism. So massive contradiction. On the one hand, you're saying Cuba is fully cooperating in the fight against terrorism, but then you still have Cuba on a list of state sponsors of terrorism. So I think we'll probably zero in on that and how we can call that contradiction to the attention of the US authorities. So
lots to do.
Lots to do.
Lots to do in the
UN
coming
agenda,
days.
Update on Haiti, the application for associate membership. Martinique is applying, Dominican Republic, Curacao, Bermuda is applying for full membership of CARICOM. So yes, those are some of the issues we will be addressing in Dominica. I'll be able to come and give a report to you next week. On some of these matters.
Understatement of the year. He said he's not the traditional civil servant. I think you're the farthest thing from the definition of a civil servant. But I want to thank you for coming in and sharing with us. Pretty long session for us today, but we had lots to get through. And we ourselves have kind of set up a few interviews with a few of the international agents who will be here for the conference in the coming days. So you too can look forward to hearing a lot more.
Thank God for CBC.
You better believe it. We're hoping to be able to connect with the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization and a few other key players for this Barbados UNCTAD Global Supply Chain Forum that's happening now in Barbados. So thank you so much, Ambassador. Safe travels, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning.